Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a slow, grimy stroll through the cobbled streets of 18th century Paris. You're not a noble, not a poet, not a philosopher sipping absinthe by candlelight. No, tonight you're something far more grounded, someone who wakes up with the city's trash. You stir in your lumpy straw mattress, the musty scent of last night's stew still lingering in the air. Outside, the city is already grumbling. Horses clop past. Vendors argue. Something that may or may not be bread is baking somewhere. And something that is definitely not bread is steaming in the gutter. The air carries a bouquet of things you'll never find in a perfume bottle. Rotting vegetables, horse dung, coal smoke, and the ripe acidity of last week's human waste. Paris is waking up, but it never really slept, because there's always someone throwing something out a window yelling, "Garde à l'eau," just in time. Or not. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the scrape of a cartwheel somewhere outside, and the muffled curse of a vendor stepping in something unspeakable. It's 5 a.m., and the sun hasn't quite burned through the fog of morning soot and vapors. Paris, you quickly remember, is filthy. And not in the romantic candlelit let's kiss on a bridge way. No, it's filthy in the very real sense that you must dodge puddles that are not, in fact, water. The mud in the alley glistens, but not from rain. Some of it may be broth, some blood, and some... well, let's just not speculate. Your nose twitches at the familiarity of it all. It's not a matter of getting used to the smell, you don't. You adapt by numbing your brain to it. The same way you tune out the sound of rats fighting behind the bakery at night. Historians still argue whether the city was truly worse than its European cousins at the time, but Paris certainly wore its stench like a crown. It wasn't just poor planning. It was medieval infrastructure stretched to Enlightenment-era density. Narrow lanes, open drains, no organized sewer system to speak of, and population growth that outpaced just about everything except maybe lice. But that's tomorrow's problem. Right now you swing your legs over the side of your straw mattress, careful not to crush the mouse you suspect has made a nest in the bed frame. You grope for your work boots, stiff with dried muck. They're not quite left and right anymore, just less damp and fewer holes. You dress quickly. The layers are meant to protect you, not from cold but from splatter. Cloth against the spray of slop buckets, the streak of spoiled cabbage, the unidentifiable slime that seems to follow you no matter where you go. Out on the street, the city starts its chorus. Roosters, yes, but also dogs barking, carts creaking, glass shattering, and the unmistakable echo of someone heaving liquid contents from a second-story window. There's a shout, "Garde à l'eau!" followed by an even louder splash. A woman shrieks. You don't look up. Veteran move. You trudge toward the corner where your shift begins, rake in hand. It's not the elegant kind used in gardens, but more like a flattened fork attached to a stick that's seen too many winters. The tines are bent. You named one of them Hope. It broke last week. You pass a group of men hauling barrels, coopers perhaps, or night soil collectors if you're unlucky. One of them nods at you, face streaked with grime, and you feel the silent camaraderie of shared odor. A brotherhood of stink. It's oddly comforting. Around you, shopkeepers begin opening their shutters, revealing piles of refuse swept just beyond their doorways. Because inside, that's their domain. Outside, that's your problem. And what a problem it is. Bones from last night's dinner, broken crockery, grease rags, and something that looks like it used to be a cat. No one's claimed it. No one will. Your rake scrapes along the stones, dragging debris into loose piles. There's a rhythm to it. Swish, clatter, curse under breath, repeat. Your mind wanders. What did people in Babylon do with their trash? Did anyone in Rome ever complain that the sewer smelled too loud? You round a corner into Rue Saint-Honoré, where the smell intensifies, not in volume but in complexity. Here, it's a layered scent profile. Top notes: onion and spoiled milk. Mid notes: horse, leather, and wet ash. Base note: probably sadness. Suddenly you hear the clomp of hooves and the clatter of wooden wheel. A garbage cart, more accurately, a trash suggestion box on wheels appears. It's already half full. The man driving it gives you a look that says, "Don't even try to fit all that in here." You do, of course. You try and you fail. Some of it spills right back out, which feels metaphorical somehow. You sigh and keep raking. Maybe today's the day someone invents a bag, or a bin, or gloves. Near the bakery, you catch a moment of bliss, a breeze carrying the scent of fresh bread. For a moment, you almost forget the squelch underfoot. Almost. A child darts past you, barefoot, shrieking with laughter. You want to tell them to wear shoes, but who are you kidding? You'd go barefoot too if your boots didn't double as pest deterrents. By mid-morning, you're sweating through your coat. The sun climbs over the chimneys, illuminating the haze of particles in the air. Ash, flour dust, something meat-related. You finish a pile and lean on your rake, surveying your work with a kind of pride only known to those who make the world 1% less unbearable at a time. You hear church bells in the distance, signaling noon. Time for the city's second act, lunch, which naturally means even more refuse to sweep come evening. But that's later. For now, you've survived another morning in the smelliest city in Europe. Probably. You stretch your back and a satisfying crack echoes off the stone walls. That's one vertebra realigned. 14 more to go. Rake in hand, you shuffle toward your assigned stretch of the quartier. This is your turf, more or less. You've worked these streets for months now, maybe years. It's hard to tell when the scenery is 80% rotting food and 20% half-chipped cobblestone. You're not officially employed by the city, not really. Paris in the 1700s doesn't have what modern folks would call municipal sanitation. No uniforms, no pension, no handy vest with reflective tape. What you have is a rusty rake, a pair of shoes with emotional baggage, and a vague understanding that if you rake trash into piles and keep the merchant fronts passable, someone might throw you a coin or a crust of yesterday's bread. Some street cleaners, voiries they're sometimes called, are contracted by neighborhood parishes, others by local guilds, and some like you just do the work because if no one does, the stench becomes unbearable even to the ones causing it. That's the beauty of Parisian trash. It's everyone's problem and no one's responsibility. Unless you're holding the rake, then it's definitely your problem. This morning, you're clearing Rue Coquillière. The name sounds delicate, like it should be home to lace makers or accordion players. But instead, it's a war zone of oyster shells, spoiled meat scraps, bits of torn fabric, and a truly impressive number of what you sincerely hope are radish tops. Some of the residents greet you. Others pretend you're invisible. Your rake a gentle reminder of the mess they left behind. One particularly refined older man steps delicately around a puddle and nods at you as if to say, "Bon courage, peasant," and continues on his way. He's wearing powdered shoes which you didn't even know was a thing. Powdered shoes in this weather, on these streets. Bold move. You lean your rake against a wall to scoop up a mess that's too gelatinous for tines. That's the trouble with this job, it's always improvisational. Yesterday you used a broken shovel, the day before that a flattened basket. Tools aren't issued. You make do with what doesn't offend your nose on contact. Historians still argue whether this kind of street-level sanitation was truly a job or more of a civic habit enforced by social pressure. Some say the sweepers were respected in a backhanded way, like chimney sweeps or stable boys. Others say they were closer to urban ghosts, always there, rarely thanked, vaguely haunting. You step aside as a maid from a nearby house empties a bucket of kitchen waste into the gutter. It sloshes down the path you just cleared, undoing 20 minutes of raking. She shrugs, tosses you a bit of hard cheese, and disappears into the doorway. You eat the cheese, you have no shame left. That went out with your last clean shirt. Behind you, two boys with a pushcart squeal with laughter as one loses a shoe in the muck. They're collecting bones, literally. It's one of the city's side gigs. Families send their children out to scavenge bones, fat, and broken pots to sell to various craftsmen. Bone turners, glue boilers, candle makers. There's an entire shadow economy thriving on what the rest of Paris tosses away. Waste is wealth if you have a strong stomach and low standards. You do a slow scan of the block and sigh. Half the trash you cleared this morning has already reappeared. There's something philosophical about that, like Sisyphus but smellier. The trash here has a rhythm. Morning is for vegetable peels and chamber pots. Midday brings fish guts and spoiled milk. By evening, the butcher's scraps arrive, along with the stray dogs and cats who will gnaw on them all night. And the next morning, you start again, wading through what the night left behind. You spot a puddle of something suspicious near the tavern and step around it, only to find your boot now stuck to a different puddle. It's unclear what substance could possibly glue leather to stone in this humidity. But Paris is nothing if not creatively disgusting. You yank your foot loose with a squelch that echoes in your soul. A baker leans out from his window above, calls down and tosses you a dry roll. For the smell, he jokes. You laugh because it's either that or weep. The roll's stale enough to be used as a weapon, but it's edible technically. You pause for a moment and lean on your rake, looking up at the sky. It's a gentle blue today, almost delicate. The kind of sky that would make a painter sigh. You wonder if anyone's ever tried painting the Paris street cleaners. Probably not. too much beige and sadness. Still, there's something satisfying about the way the sunlight bounces off the cobbles. Tiny prisms of light flickering through the haze. Even filth has its moments of beauty. Brief ones, usually followed by the unmistakable crunch of stepping on a snail. You round a corner and nearly collide with a gentleman emptying a chamber pot from a second-story window. No warning, no garde à l'eau, just splash. Thankfully, it misses you by about a foot, though you're not sure if thankfully is the right word. The wall beside you now glistens with the kind of substance that makes you reconsider every life decision. He peers down, shrugs, and closes his shutters. No apology, just another Tuesday. You remember someone once tried to regulate that. A city ordinance said people had to shout before dumping liquids out the window. But like many laws in Paris, it was more suggestion than rule. Enforcement was lax unless the wrong person got splashed. You once heard a story about a noblewoman getting hit with chamber pot contents on her way to Mass. Legend says the man responsible disappeared, into prison, into exile. Historians still argue whether the tale is true or just another Parisian myth wrapped in sewage. You shake your head and keep moving. Your shift's not over yet, and the pile near the apothecary looks like it's begun evolving sentience. You give it a solid rake and whisper, "Not today." You're only halfway down the block when the street starts telling you stories. Its own version of a morning newsletter, except instead of headlines, you read in footprints, bloodstains, vegetable matter, and the occasional tooth. And that's just one corner. Your rake bumps against something heavy. A cheese wheel gone rogue, half-eaten and fully moldy. You wonder how many hours it's been sitting there. Not many, probably. In Paris, food waste doesn't last long. It either gets scooped by scavengers, eaten by animals, or trodden into the cobbles like an offering to the gods of rot. You keep pushing debris toward the edge of the alley where an informal line separates the acceptable trash zone from the get your trash off my doorstep zone. These invisible boundaries are enforced by little more than neighborly aggression and, occasionally, thrown vegetables. Social etiquette in Paris is less about politeness and more about knowing where to put your goose bones. The thing is, not everyone has the same trash or the same relationship to it. A wealthy merchant's refuse looks very different from that of the washerwoman downstairs. You've seen the difference. The upper floors of these tall houses are often rented to the poorest tenants, meaning the rich live lower down. Why? So they don't have to climb stairs, which also means they're more likely to get hit by something tossed from above. Parisian irony. Historians still argue whether this architectural design influenced class resentment or merely reflected it. But either way, it made cleaning streets an exercise in socio-political cartography. You could map the city's hierarchy by what littered its gutters. Take Rue Montorgueil, for example. The boulangers and charcutiers there dump out plenty of fat, stale bread and bones, but those bones are cleaned of every scrap. You know the kind of house that has meat worth trimming. Over near the Latin Quarter where students dwell, the trash is weirder. Scraps of parchment, broken quills, and once a jar of what smelled like goat milk and hope. You didn't touch that one. You pass a pile with the torn corset and a broken glass jar labeled Eau de Rose. Either someone had a particularly dramatic breakup, or the apothecary next door has gone rogue again. You don't ask questions, you just rake. But there's an unspoken rule in your line of work. Not all garbage is equal. Some is sacred, and some will get you yelled at for touching. Privilege in this city extends to the right to rot. You remember Madame Lenoir from 2 doors down? She once screamed at a sweeper for discarding her rotten bouquets. They were apparently a gift from a very important gentleman. The flowers were blackened, half wilted and attracting bees. But they were her bees, as she put it. You nodded politely and moved on. The bees were not as polite. Trash becomes a form of communication here. A neighbor throws her potato peels out after 8 a.m. She's either sleeping in or angry. A butcher discards good bones. Someone in that house is sick. A wine bottle with the cork still in. Either a theft or a very bad party. You read the signs as naturally as reading the weather, except in Paris both can make you wet and miserable. You pause to rest by a shop front. Wooden shutters still closed. Above it, painted on the wall, is a sign for a hat maker. You glance down at the trash pile by his door. Ribbons, felt scraps, the crushed remains of a feather fan. Either he's been busy or very bored. You pick up a strip of fabric that somehow avoided the muck and wrap it around the handle of your rake for grip. Nothing goes to waste, not even waste. Some neighborhoods are proud of their trash, oddly enough. On festival days, it's not uncommon to see families dump extra scraps. Fruit peels, flower petals, crumbled cake into the streets as part of the revelry. You once saw a parade float made entirely of broken spoons and crushed melon rinds. It collapsed halfway down Rue du Temple, and the rats were celebrating for weeks. But pride doesn't clean cobblestones. That's your job. You scrape up a pile that's begun fermenting in the sun. The smell is less putrid and more angry wine. It sticks to your nostrils like beeswax and your eyes water. You mutter a prayer to Saint Fiacre, patron saint of gardeners, who's also unofficially the patron saint of people who deal with, let's call it, earthiness. No miracle comes, but the pile is smaller by the time you're done. Some locals have taken to organizing their refuse. Little bundles of tied-up straw with bones inside. Neatly stacked piles of ash. Someone even labeled a chamber pot last week. For Tanner only. It read. You respect that. You left it alone. Still, it's mostly chaos. One man's compost is another man's project. You once watched a woman dig through fish bones with terrifying purpose, only to walk away clutching a single fin and whispering, "Perfect." She's probably a sorceress, but hey, everyone needs hobbies. Historians note that 18th century Paris had no formal system for separating waste. The idea of recycling didn't exist as we know it. But informally, absolutely. If it could be reused, someone would find a way. Ash was used to make soap. Pea went to tanners. Broken pottery made fill for roads. Even hair was gathered to stuff cushions or craft wigs. The city was its own bizarre ecosystem of need, stink, and ingenuity. And that's the real wonder. Somehow it works. Paris keeps stumbling forward on a path made of chicken bones, laundry water, and spit. You rake another pile into a loose pyramid and feel a tiny flicker of pride. Tomorrow it'll be back. But for now, You've carved a tiny pocket of order from the city's glorious entropy. You wipe your brow. Your shirt is now 60% sweat, 20% soot, and 20% philosophical regret. You sniff once, big mistake, and get back to it. The moment you hear the first metallic slosh echoing from a nearby alley, you know exactly what's coming. You brace yourself, not emotionally because you've long since stopped doing that, but physically. You adjust your grip on the rake, step aside, and wait for the unmistakable procession of the city's most underappreciated economy, the pea collectors. Yes, that kind of pea. In 18th century Paris, urine is not merely waste, it's a commodity. Tanners, fullers, and dyers practically bathe in the stuff. Well, not literally, though in some cases maybe literally. They use it to process leather, to soften fabrics, to set dyes. Urine, especially aged urine, is prized for its ammonia content. You'd think people would be embarrassed about it. They're not. It's industry. Historians still argue whether this pea economy developed organically out of medieval folk practices or if it was structured from the start by guild regulation. Either way, it's lucrative. Sort of. As you walk along Rue des Lombards, you spot Madame Truffaut and her two boys hauling a barrel down the lane. The barrel is nearly half their height and sways ominously as they drag it. You tip your hat to her. She grins and yells, "Night batch!" with more pride than most nobles display when announcing a ball. You nod in return. Pea is power. Not every household collects it, but many do. They keep it in pots, barrels, jars, whatever's available. It's a surprisingly democratic system. Rich and poor, all pea alike, but only some know its true worth. That's where the collectors come in. You pass a house with a sign scrawled in charcoal. Urine for sale, best batch, 5 sols. Below it, a suspicious-looking jug sits at the doorstep. You don't ask questions. You just rake around it. One of the strangest things you've learned over time is just how many crafts depend on the city's fluids. The tanners along the Seine, the ones with forearms like tree trunks and skin like boiled leather, buy the stuff in bulk. They soak hides in it to break down proteins. If you ever wondered why old Paris tanneries had that particular nose-curling scent, now you know. It wasn't just the hides. You remember visiting one once, delivering rags for a friend. The smell knocked you backwards somewhere between fermented apples and murder. A man inside was happily stirring a pit with a stick, elbow deep in... Well, let's move on. Some claim the best urine comes from early morning collections. Something about the body's overnight concentration. Others swear by wine drinkers' pee. You once overheard a dyer say he could tell if someone had eaten onions just from the way his dye came out. A useful party trick, you suppose, if you're at the right kind of party. The nickname for this prized liquid is eau de javel in some circles, but most people just call it what it is. The euphemisms don't stick. Not when the cart hauling it creaks past you with the smell that makes your teeth ache. You're raking near a fountain when a group of children runs by, giggling and singing a rhyme about yellow soup. It's catchy, in that annoying can't get it out of your head sort of way. One of them points at your rake and yells, "He knows where the soup goes!" You laugh, barely. Then pretend you didn't hear it. The truth is you do know. You know where everything goes. The vegetable scraps, the bones, the straw, the rags, and yes, the pea. especially the pea. Paris is a maze of materials in motion. What doesn't rot feeds something. What can't be burned gets buried. And what smells the worst is oddly the most useful. You rake around a puddle that glistens with a faint sheen. It's either oil or something much more exciting. You give it a wide berth. Some smells are best left alone. At one corner, you stop to chat with old Julien, who claims he was the first man to ever sell his own urine to a glassmaker. You nod politely while he explains how it brightens the crystal. Is it true? Historians still debate it. You suspect Julien might be embellishing, especially since he also claims to have invented vinegar. Further up the street, a tall man in a green coat lugs a small cart behind him. He's one of the independent traders, not formally hired, not officially licensed, just someone who saw an opportunity and seized it. On the side of his cart, he's painted a crude image of a chamber pot with a crown above it. The slogan beneath reads, "Only the finest." You admire the marketing. You pause for a moment and sit on a low wall near the cart path. Around you, the city pulses with its quiet systems. Some you can see, others you only smell. A maid empties a pot into a bucket. A boy with a cloth bag picks through trash for bones. A woman wrings out a mop and dumps the water down a drain. All of it flows, not efficiently, not neatly, but it flows, and in this ecosystem of refuse you have a role. Maybe not a glamorous one, but a necessary one. You keep the paths clear, you make way for the carts. You notice when a rat dies and someone needs to move it. You're the broom behind the curtain. And the curtain? Oh, it smells like vinegar and hope. As the sun shifts, so does the light on the cobblestones. A kind of golden haze settles over the city. You catch a breeze that miraculously doesn't reek. For one fleeting moment, the street smells like bread and maybe, just maybe, faint lavender. You savor it. It'll be gone soon. You rise and get back to it, raking a trail past a tannery runoff channel and toward the next corner, where someone has just dropped what looks like half a sheep's head. You don't even blink. Just another morning. You spot it before you smell it, which is a small mercy. A pile by the market stalls, half covered in buzzing fleas, writhing just enough to make your stomach tighten. It's a mound of things that were once edible, now performing an enthusiastic audition for rotting compost of the year. This is Les Halles, Paris's grand central market, proudly providing meat, produce, and a recurring nightmare for anyone with functioning nostrils. You take a breath, or at least attempt one through your sleeve. It doesn't help. The scent is stubborn, clinging to the air like an insult. This is where food goes to die, sometimes twice. Each day, hundreds of merchants set up stalls and sell everything from fresh apples to animal guts, often within arm's reach of one another. Fish flaps next to garlic, sheep brains nestle beside cheese. The smells tango in the humid breeze, forming a volatile cocktail of nourishment and nausea. Your job this morning? Clear the remains. You wade through cracked cabbage leaves, chicken feet, bruised apples, and something that might be eel skin. One time you found a pig's eyeball staring up at you like it had something to say. You nodded respectfully. It's best to be polite. You start raking, gently at first, not wanting to surprise any of the street's more mobile inhabitants. Sure enough, a rat darts from the pile, tail twitching, annoyed that you've ruined his breakfast buffet. You shrug, let him file a complaint with City Hall. As you dig deeper, you hit a sticky resistance, bone, fat, and congealed grease forming a sediment layer. This isn't just trash. This is history in progress. Future archaeologists will find this and wonder why so many turnip tops and pigeon beaks were buried together. The market's butcher stall is especially fragrant. A man with forearms the size of hams is flinging rib cages and sinew into a shallow pit behind his counter. You rake nearby, giving him a nod. He gives you a hunk of something. It might be jerky. You accept it without question and tuck it away. Hunger outranks fear after all. Not far off, you notice a pile of clean-picked bones stacked neatly behind a cart. They're headed to a bone turner, one of the many craftsmen who rely on market refuse. He'll turn them into buttons, combs, dice, or handles. Nothing goes to waste, if someone's clever enough. Historians still argue whether Paris's informal recycling culture was born from necessity or craft tradition. But whatever the reason, it runs deep. Tanners buy the hides. Cooks scoop up old fat to render for candles. Even spoiled milk gets a second life as an ingredient in dubious skin creams. One merchant claimed his sour milk facial potion could smooth wrinkles and ward off heartbreak. Judging by his skin, he was halfway right. You rake near a fruit stall, careful not to disturb the baskets of figs someone left behind, likely because they were too smashed to sell but not quite rotten enough to abandon. A cat watches you from under a crate. It blinks slowly. You blink back. Behind you, two women in stained aprons shout at each other over a barrel of fish heads. The fight, from what you can gather, is over who has rights to a particularly plump-looking cod skull. You consider stepping in, but think better of it. Fish head diplomacy is a delicate art. You rake the alley behind the bakery next. The scent here is miraculously pleasant, a lingering sweetness of crusted sugar and yeast. Mixed in with the trash are burned croissants, stale rolls, and an entire pie that appears to have collapsed under its own ambitions. You've noticed bakers are more generous with their refuse than butchers. Maybe because bread doesn't smell like revenge when it rots. A boy darts past you, arms full of leftover baguettes. He's not stealing, he's salvaging. Likely on orders from a neighbor who will dry the bread, grind it into flour, or feed it to pigs. Or in some darker corners of the city, soak it in milk and call it pudding. You stop for a sip of water from your flask. It tastes faintly of iron and regret, but it's cool. You sit on a crate and watch as the city churns around you. A woman with a bucket of wilted lettuce dumps it behind a cart. A man pours oil from a ruined barrel into a gutter where it swirls like paint before joining a puddle already occupied by wine lees and beet peelings. And that's the poetry of it, really. Paris breathes in food and breathes out filth. Every feast becomes a cleanup. Every delicacy ends in a puddle. It's beautiful in the same way compost is beautiful, if you squint and don't breathe too hard. The city's economy thrives on this cycle. Cooks need ingredients. Merchants need space. Artisans need raw refuse, and cleaners like you You need strong arms and stronger stomachs. You once tried to keep a list of everything you raked in a single week. You gave up when it started to resemble a cursed cookbook. Page 1 included 1/2 pheasant, uncooked, slightly crushed, 13 grape stems, 2 eel skins, braided, and what may have been the heel of a wooden shoe. The list grew too long, so now you don't keep track. You rake, pile, push, and let the carts take the rest, if the carts arrive. More on that later. For now, you focus on clearing a path between the fishmonger and the florist. The contrast is delightful and alarming. One side smells like crushed blossoms and rosemary, the other like despair in liquid form. You rake carefully. Even your rake deserves a break from fish guts sometimes. You look up and notice a painter across the street sketching the morning scene. He's trying to capture Paris in motion, you overheard him say earlier. His brush moves quickly, but he pinches his nose the entire time. You admire his dedication to the aesthetic, even if he's clearly new here. You finish your circuit around the market as the sun rises higher, casting longer shadows across the stalls. The merchants shout louder, the smells intensify, and the flies grow bolder. You lean on your rake, watching it all unfold. It's chaos. Glorious, fragrant chaos. And somehow, it all works. You make your way back toward the street's edge, where the cobbles darken and slope gently downward, toward the zone where refuse is meant to be picked up. Meant to be. That's doing a lot of work. Here, theoretically, is where the garbage carts come. You've seen them. You've even helped load a few, but whether they arrive on time or at all is a kind of lottery that Paris plays with itself every day. A wheeled wager of scent and civic failure. Today there's no cart in sight, no creaking axle, no horse snorting in protest, no grumbling driver with a half-buttoned coat, and the haunted look of a man who's seen what spoiled fish can do to a wheel spoke. You lean your rake against the wall and wait. It's part of the job. Waiting, watching, wondering if someone higher up has remembered that your pile exists. Historians still argue whether Paris ever had a truly reliable refuse collection system before the revolution. Some accounts say yes. Under the monarchy, licensed garbage haulers were paid per route. Others claim it was patchwork at best, with entire quartiers waiting days for a pickup. Either way, the result was often the same, a street cleaned in the morning, piled high again by dusk. A woman pokes her head out from a window above you. "Where's the cart?" she calls. You look up and give the universal shrug of municipal indifference. She sighs and pours yesterday's soup bones into the pile you just finished. You nod. Fair enough. The official carts are run by a mix of guild contractors and private haulers. They're drawn by horses, some by oxen, with flatbeds or open barrels that leak as they jostle over uneven stones. You've seen those trails, thin lines of spoiled milk, ash, grease, and sometimes soup. You try not to follow them with your eyes. There lies madness. They're supposed to come by quarter. Some routes are prioritized around royal buildings, government offices, or fashionable neighborhoods where someone's cousin has a title. The rest of the city, they get the leftovers, and not just in refuse. You remember last Tuesday. You'd built a perfect pile, elegant even, balanced, compact. It smelled no worse than a damp sheep. And then, Nothing. No cart. No word. You stood there for hours as it slowly melted back into the street like a cheese sculpture on a sunny windowsill. By nightfall, it had been trampled, rained on, and partially eaten by a goat that definitely didn't live there. Today looks like a repeat performance. A dog trots past and sniffs the pile. It sneezes and immediately walks away. That's the level we're dealing with. You wander down toward a square where two other cleaners have gathered. One is whittling a stick. The other is playing with a pebble and staring into the middle distance like a philosopher pondering the nature of grime. The cart's late again, you mutter. They nod, not even surprised. The horse broke a shoe, one offers. Or the driver got into a fight with the wine cellar. Or maybe he forgot what day it was. All three are equally possible. You sit on an overturned bucket and pull a bit of stale bread from your coat pocket. It's hard as stone, but you gnaw it anyway. Your teeth are too far gone to care. A child walks by and asks if you've seen the trash pony. You shake your head. He frowns disappointed and disappears into the alley. Probably on some grand adventure involving candle wax and broken cart wheels. The sun creeps higher. The pile begins to steam. You poke it once just to see if it's alive. So far, no movement. Just a slow slump, like it knows it's been abandoned. At long last, the telltale clatter of hooves reaches your ears. You straighten. You squint into the sunlight. And there it is, the cart. It lumbers into view like a tired beast, wobbling slightly, the horse's tail flicking in time with its own boredom. The driver looks half asleep. His hat is askew. His face says, "Don't talk to me unless your trash is about to bite someone." You wave him over. He nods. The cart stops. The horse snorts. You grab your rake and start lifting the pile, tossing bundles of refuse into the open bed. Each thud sends a puff of something skyward. You don't breathe too deeply. Some things are better left unexplored. The cart already stinks. Your pile just adds character. As you toss in the last of the day's vegetable mash, the driver gives a grunt of thanks and flicks the reins. The cart groans forward, leaving behind a trail of mystery liquid. You stare at the freshly emptied space. For a moment, the street feels clean. Not fresh exactly, but clean by comparison. You exhale. It's fleeting, but it's something. You give the ground a final sweep, pushing stray bits toward the gutter. There's no applause. No one thanks you. But a woman does step outside her shop and nod in your direction. That's practically a medal. And then, because Paris cannot go 5 minutes without asserting itself, a man stumbles from a nearby tavern and promptly vomits in the spot you just cleaned. You stare at it. He stares at you. "Sorry," he mutters. "Wrong cobblestone." You nod. You've heard worse. You sigh, adjust your rake, and begin again. You'd think after all these hours of scraping, dragging, and gently cursing under your breath, there'd be a moment to breathe. But now you're heading toward the edges of Le Marais, where the streets are narrower, the corners tighter, and, ironically, the people wealthier. And wealthier people come with expectations. As you step into this fancier patch of Paris, the mood shifts. The air smells slightly more of soap, less of soup. There are pots of flowers in windows and the trash piles smaller, neater, wrapped in cloth, sometimes even tied with twine. It's like the refuse is ashamed of itself. The people here don't leave their mess out in the open like commoners. No, they whisper it to the curb, they arrange it. And heaven forbid you don't sweep fast enough, because someone will definitely open a shutter and clear their throat in your direction. One woman once tapped her fan against her chin for 10 straight minutes as you cleared fish bones from beneath her parlor window. Not a word, just tapping. Passive aggression wrapped in lace. You rake more gently here, aware of the invisible social rules. Don't scratch the stones, don't clank your boots, definitely don't sneeze. Trash in rich neighborhoods is not so much cleaner as it is concealed. There are secrets in these piles. Shattered porcelain hidden under tea leaves, embroidered handkerchiefs used once and thrown away. Sometimes you pause and wonder why someone tossed an entire smoked duck. Did it fall out of favor, or was it cursed? Historians still argue whether the elite's relationship with refuse was a matter of aesthetics or social distancing. Was it shame or pride? Probably both. Either way, trash here wears a disguise, but it's still trash. You pass a servant discreetly emptying a chamber pot into a velvet-covered bucket. You don't comment. He doesn't make eye contact. You both know the game. The bucket gets placed quietly outside the service door, usually just before dark. Then someone like you comes by, pretends not to notice what's inside, and it disappears by morning. Magical. You once saw a valet slip a soiled glove into a bundle of linen rags as though performing sleight of hand. You wanted to applaud, but what the upper classes have in manners, they lack in gratitude. In the poorer quarters, you might get a crust of bread, a wink, or even a joke. Here, you're lucky if someone doesn't sigh at you. Still, you don't blame them entirely. In a city where everyone steps through filth daily, the rich are doing what rich people always do, paying to pretend. And part of pretending means pretending you don't know where your garbage goes or who takes it. You reach a particularly grand home, 3 stories tall with stone lions on either side of the door. Outside, an iron bin sits discreetly behind a bush. Inside, orange peels, wax scraps, a broken wig comb, and something that might be a parrot feather. You rake it carefully, trying not to disturb the gravel walkway. Last time you did, someone reported vandalism of the landscaping. The landscaping, by the way, was a dead shrub and a rock. You clear the pile, then smooth the path with your rake as though you were grooming a garden. Appearances matter here. Down the street, a maid stops you and quietly hands over a folded note. You open it to find a list, specific items to be disposed of with discretion. It includes 3 crushed perfume bottles, a satin garter, and what appears to be an entire lemon tart. You blink. The tart is underlined. You rake the items from a burlap sack set outside her gate, covering them quickly with straw. The tart looks perfectly edible, but you resist. It's not for you. It's for the shadows. Later, you'll see a stray dog licking powdered sugar off the street, and you'll know exactly where it came from. Some of the city's wealthier residents bribe local cleaners like you to come more often. A few even employ private sweepers, men who wear cleaner coats and work at night like janitorial phantoms. You saw one once gliding through a side street in white gloves and a muffler. He nodded at you. You nodded back. There was mutual respect there, or maybe mutual exhaustion. Still, you noticed the double standard. In the slums, people are fined for leaving piles outside too long. In Le Marais, fines are rare. Complaints go straight to the quartermaster, who is usually someone's cousin, brother-in-law, or fencing partner. Wealth buys leniency just like it buys flowers to cover manure. You pass a gated alley where a servant girl is beating a rug. Dust fills the air like fog. You wave. She waves back. In that cloud of soot and horsehair, there's camaraderie. You're both just trying to keep up with the city that never quite stops making a mess. A nobleman struts past you, boots polished, coat tight across his belly, his wig at least 2 days past its prime. He gives you a wide berth, pressing a scented handkerchief to his face. The irony is you're the one who makes his walk possible. You clear the path, smooth the stones, sweep aside the paper that fluttered out of his own pockets. And still he won't acknowledge you. But that's Paris. Some people step in garbage. Some people step around it. And some of us move it. As you finish the block, the afternoon light glows golden against the stone. The shadows stretch, and the piles are smaller here, more contained. You lean on your rake and look back down the lane. It's not perfect, but it's passable, which, in this city, is victory. You rest for a moment, letting your arms hang limp. Your shirt sticks to your back. Your boots squelch faintly, and somewhere behind a lace curtain, someone is already tossing orange peels into a fresh pile. You smile, time to start again. As you round the bend into a shadier lane, you hear a familiar rustling sound. Tiny claws on stone, the scratchy shuffle of tails, the patter of something soft and stealthy. You slow your steps. You know who truly rules this part of Paris: rats and cats, and occasionally a goose with boundary issues. They dart across your path like shadows, weaving through alleyways, climbing barrels, balancing on roof edges. A trash cleaner in 18th century Paris quickly learns that the city's most reliable sanitation workers are, in fact, not people at all. They're whiskered, furry, and deeply judgmental. Rats, for starters, are everywhere. In bakeries, under carts, inside wine cellars, under your bed if you're unlucky. They are part of the ecosystem, like pigeons in modern parks, only smarter and more likely to nibble your boots. You don't hate them. How could you? They're doing their part. They eat what no one else dares to. Clean up what your rake can't reach, and provide an unending source of shrieks for unsuspecting shopgirls. One particularly bold rat, whom you've secretly named Bertrand, often follows your path, scavenging from your piles moments after you pass. You've come to respect him. He's fast, he's efficient, and he once scared off a dog 3 times his size. You're not saying you look up to Bertrand, but if he ran for mayor, you'd vote for him. Historians still argue whether rat populations actually helped curb certain types of waste in pre-revolutionary Paris, or simply redistributed it. Some believe the rats prevented even worse plagues by cleaning up biohazardous scraps. Others think they just moved the filth from one spot to another and multiplied while doing it. Either way, they were there, always, watching, scuttling. But rats aren't the only ones on patrol. Cats are the unofficial constables of Paris's underworld. Slim, mean, and sharp-eyed, they rule the rooftops and prowl the alleys like they own them. Many belong to no one. Some have been semi-adopted by shopkeepers, bakers, or even butchers who tolerate them for their skills and scorn them for their attitudes. You pass a fish stall where 3 cats sit lined up like judges. One licks its paw delicately, watching you with an expression that suggests you're doing it all wrong. You nod respectfully. There's even a superstition among street workers. If a cat crosses your path while you're raking a pile, you'll find something strange in it, like a tooth, a love letter, or half of someone's wig. You've tested it. The superstition holds. You once found an entire letter written in faded ink that read only, "Do not trust the man with the red scarf." You kept it in your coat pocket for weeks, just in case. Sometimes you find more exotic creatures. A runaway parrot once screamed profanities at you from a lamppost. You were impressed. And then, of course, there was that goose, a monstrous, honking creature that guarded a butcher's alley for nearly 6 weeks like it had been knighted. No one dared cross it. You named her Madame Rage. The animal kingdom here doesn't ask for permission. It just slots itself into the work of the city. Dogs rummage through bones, chickens peck at crumbs, pigs root through alley corners. You once saw a donkey patiently chewing on a velvet curtain. It looked pleased. These creatures live where people dump, and Paris dumps everywhere. In the gutters, in the squares behind taverns, under balconies. Any spot becomes a refuse zone if you turn away for 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, the animal patrol gets to work. You rake around a trash heap behind a perfumery and find 3 kittens sleeping on a pile of wilted rose petals. It smells almost nice. You pause, adjust your rake, and give them a soft path to climb down should they wake. You're not heartless. Someone claps behind you, an old woman from the upper floor leaning out with a broom. She points to a bucket of fish heads near her door and mimes, "Get rid of it." You nod, but as you approach, a fat gray cat snarls at you like you've just insulted its mother. You stop. You back away. The fish heads remain. You're not risking that kind of violence before lunch. In the slums, people sometimes keep rats as pets. Small ones, the clever kind. Children name them, feed them crumbs. You've seen a boy coax his rat to do flips with nothing more than a button and a whisper. Meanwhile, in the upper neighborhoods, rat sightings result in shrieks and shoe throwing. You once overheard a nobleman declare rats only exist where the poor refuse to clean. You wanted to hand him a rake and point him toward the bakery district. There's an unsaid hierarchy. Rats clean what people won't. Cats keep rats honest. Dogs guard bones, and you sweep behind them all. There's even a kind of shared schedule. You rake in the morning. The rats clean up through the night. The cats patrol intermittently, hissing at anything with a tail longer than their patience. And pigeons. Don't get started on pigeons. A baker you know swears he saw a pigeon steal a candied almond, eat half of it, then drop the rest onto a fresh laundry line. He says it was deliberate. He also says the pigeons are unionizing. You don't argue. You stop beside a drain and watch as a rat nibbles a bit of soft cheese and scurries under a barrel. A cat eyes it but doesn't move. Maybe they have an arrangement. Maybe everyone in Paris has arrangements, you included. In some ways, you envy them, the animals. They don't wait for carts, they don't get fines, they don't answer to quartermasters or aldermen or merchants yelling about the smell. They take what they want, make use of the mess, and sleep in the sun. But then again, you have a rake, a fine rake, slightly bent but loyal. You adjust your grip and push another heap toward the gutter, stepping over a trail of chicken feathers and something that smells faintly of mint. Behind you, a cat purrs. You take that as approval. Your boots squelch as you step into a puddle that looks shallow but isn't. You don't want to think about what it's made of. You don't want to think, period. But you're in the lower part of the quarter now, the slope near Rue Mouffetard, and everything flows downhill here. Everything. The truth is, Paris in the 18th century has no working sewer system. Or more accurately, it had one, sort of. A few ancient Roman tunnels lie beneath the city, crumbling and forgotten, used only by the bold, the desperate, or the deeply misinformed. For the rest of the population, waste disposal follows a simpler model. Toss it, pray it goes away, and blame the smell on the neighbors. And blame they do. Here, the streets are slick with runoff, not from rain, but from every form of household discard. Dishwater, laundry sludge, soup gone rogue, and human waste, of course, lots of it. So much so that the cobblestones have grooves carved into them over time. Not by carts or wheels, but by the endless rivers of refuse sluicing downhill like nature's worst punchline. You step carefully. Not because you're afraid you passed the point of fear years ago, but because you respect the flow. You don't argue with gravity. Not here, it always wins. Historians still argue whether the medieval Parisian drainage channels were better maintained than those in the Enlightenment era. Some say the growing population overwhelmed an aging infrastructure. Others claim the infrastructure was always bad, and people just got louder about it. Either way, the result is a city where you measure a good day by whether your shoes stay relatively dry. You rake slowly here, no sudden moves. The liquid trails are deceptive. They look harmless, reflective even, like a pretty puddle after a storm, but the smell tells a different story. A story with a beginning, middle, and very messy ending. And then there's the gutters. Parisian gutters aren't cute little water channels. They're canals of chaos. Some are half clogged with straw, grease, bones, or soggy paper. Others run free, carving their own rebellious paths between market stalls and cafes. If you listen closely, they gurgle. That's never a good sign. You once dropped a spoon in one. You left it there. You pass a shop where a woman is mopping her entryway, then pouring the bucket contents straight into the gutter. You tip your hat. She shrugs. It's the circle of Parisian life. Some people do try to be tidy. You've seen residents carry their chamber pots to the back alley before dumping them. Others shout the required garde à l'eau before flinging. Technically, that cry is mandated by law. You must warn those below before emptying any liquid load from a window. But enforcement is casual. You've been hit before, everyone has. One time, a particularly enthusiastic woman shouted the warning, but then waited so long to dump that 3 people had already passed under the window. The 4th was not so lucky. He screamed. She apologized. He screamed again. Life went on. You rake around a fresh deposit of mystery origin. It smells faintly like overcooked cabbage and betrayal. You've given up trying to identify everything. It's better that way. And then there's the grills. Metal drain covers peppered throughout the city. They were once meant to lead to underground drainage channels. Now most are clogged or broken. You try to push a bit of sludge into one, but it slaps back at you with a wet plop. Rejected. You sigh. The Seine, once the pride of the city, has become its final dump. All roads, all gutters, all trails of slop seem to end at the river. It's where the carts eventually go. It's where people dump things they really want to forget. But it doesn't forget. You remember seeing it once, early morning, fog curling over its surface like some divine shroud. It looked peaceful. Then a pig carcass floated by. You rake another trail of refuse down a shallow incline, guiding it toward the nearest gutter opening like a shepherd herding extremely unfortunate sheep. Behind you, the sun glints off a puddle so brightly you have to squint. For a second, the city looks almost magical. Then your boot slips, the moment is gone. And here's the deeper indignity. This isn't even the worst part of Paris. In the true slum districts, those pressed against the city walls, there are places where waste doesn't even pretend to drain. It just stays, pools, ferments, becomes part of the geography. Locals have named the worst spots. There's the grotto, the brown lake, and that alley you don't go down after dark. You once dared to clean the grotto. Your rake came out heavier than when it went in. You burned your clothes afterward. You reach a square where children are playing. Playing, right there. 2 feet from a running gutter. They hop between dry stones like it's a game. You admire their optimism and their immune systems. A boy trips and lands next to a drain. You rush forward, rake in hand, but he laughs and pops back up, holding what appears to be a frog. It croaks, you back away. Respect. Not all waste is liquid, of course. There's also soot, tons of it, falling from chimneys, coating windows, and mixing with every damp surface to form a grimy paste. You once tried to wash your hands in a bucket of rainwater and ended up dirtier than before. The soot here doesn't wash off, it just migrates. Even the air feels thick. On especially humid days, it hangs in your lungs like a damp coat. Breathing becomes an activity you do reluctantly through your mouth with frequent regrets. And still, somehow, people live here, thrive even. The baker still makes his bread. The fishmonger still yells his prices. Lovers still meet in corners and kiss against crumbling walls. Noses wrinkling nod at each other. But at the bouquet of 17 neighborhood dumpsters combined, you rake one final pile toward the gutter, watching it slip away, swallowed by the city's oldest problem. You don't smile, but your face relaxes. For now, the street is clean, at least until the next chamber pot tips over. The stink hits you before the fabric does. A breeze carries a scent so violently floral it nearly makes you trip. You brace yourself just in time to avoid walking straight into a silk curtain fluttering from a carriage window. The curtain is scented, very scented, with something meant to smell like roses, but comes off more like desperation and crushed berries. Welcome to the boudoirs of olfactory warfare. You've entered a pocket of Paris where perfume isn't luxury, it's armor. Around the Tuileries and the Place Vendôme, noblemen and ladies drift about in clouds of scent so strong it feels like walking through a powder room during an earthquake. And it's not because they enjoy it. Well, some do, but mostly it's because the city reeks. Perfume is their only defense. You pass a well-dressed gentleman who practically glows with oils and scented powder. His boots gleam, his waistcoat sparkles, and his wig smells faintly of lavender and... Is that burnt sugar? He tips his head in your direction, a perfumed nod of solidarity as he hurries past a puddle of animal fat with heroic restraint. Back in your own, less fragranced corner of society, you might splash water on your neck or tuck a dried herb under your shirt. Here, they deploy scent like generals commanding troops. Musk, civet, violet, rose, lemon, ambergris, yes, the whale kind. They carry sachets under their arms, scent their gloves, even dab perfume on their fans, so that when they flap the air, it's the right kind of air. Historians still argue whether 18th century perfume habits were more about health or class signaling. Some believed strong scents could literally ward off disease by overpowering the miasmas thought to carry plague. Others probably more accurately used it as a way to avoid fainting in the face of Paris's ambience. You once heard a rumor that Marie Antoinette kept a special perfumer whose only job was to scent her wigs. Considering how tall those wigs were, it tracks. You imagine a man climbing a stepladder with a vial of lavender essence and a look of quiet shame. There's a man on the corner now selling wax pomades, little pots of perfume-laced hair grease. His pitch is simple. Smell better than your street. It's not bad. You consider investing. You rake around a particularly fragrant puddle that someone clearly tried to cover with crushed jasmine. It's like spraying cologne on a corpse. It doesn't fool anyone, but it buys you a moment. A few steps later, a noblewoman lifts her skirt to avoid stepping in horse droppings. Her shoes are brocaded, her face powdered to porcelain, and her tiny dog looks like it's judging both of you equally. She glances your way, flinches at the scent you carry, then dabs her handkerchief to her nose with a practiced flutter. You're used to it. You carry the smell of Paris, the real Paris, not the powdery fiction. It clings to your coat. It lives in your hair. Once a perfumer asked to study your clothes just to understand what 17 types of trash smelled like blended together. You declined, mostly because you were wearing your only coat. The fashion now is scent-masking accessories. Men carry scented canes with hollow heads filled with herbs or citrus peel. Women wear pomanders, little perfume balls on chains, or tuck orange blossoms into their corsets. You even saw someone strap a sprig of mint to their lapel with a ribbon. It looked like a garnish for a human cocktail. And when all else fails, they burn things. Incense, herbs, vinegar-soaked cloths. You pass a townhouse with smoke curling from its windows. Not fire, but rosemary. Someone inside is fumigating the foyer again. You can tell by the smell of roasting herbs and expensive upholstery. A footman stands outside, fanning the doorway like he's guarding a sacred temple. You nod as you pass. He doesn't move. Probably stuck in a trance of lavender and despair, you pause to rake a small pile of refuse near a perfumery. It's oddly specific. Dried rose petals, orange peels, broken wax seals, and a snapped fan stick. The signature scent of someone who tried to live elegantly and tripped over her own grace. Even trash is fragrant here, but don't be fooled. Beneath the powder and pomade lies the same city, sweating, seeping, smelling. You know better than anyone, all the violet oil in the world can't disguise a backed-up drain. Still, the effort is admirable. In its own delusional way. You once saw a man collapse in a faint from heat and scent combined. Too many layers of wool, too much bergamot. He crumpled to the ground like a tragic tulip. Someone fanned him with a lace handkerchief and whispered, "It was the patchouli." A moment of silence followed. Then the dog peed on his shoe. You turn the corner and see a soap vendor hauling his cart uphill. He waves. You wave back. His soaps are shaped like tiny birds, and you once saw a child try to eat one. He didn't get far. Soap is rare, by the way. Real soap, expensive. Most people just splash water on themselves and hope for the best. The wealthy, they buy rose-scented bars and use them sparingly, sometimes just to perfume drawers. You rake past a bar of it now, lying in the gutter, half melted and abandoned. A tragedy. Still, you catch its scent, faint, pleasant, almost like almond. You pause. Take it. You deserve one nice thing today. As the bells ring in the distance and the perfume clouds settle, you realize something strange. The stink has layers. The city isn't just foul, it's complicated. A blend of sweat and sugar, blood and lavender. A place where filth wears silk and garbage wears rouge. You adjust your rake. The pile you just cleared now smells faintly like geraniums. And under that, horse. Always horse. You step carefully past the stone steps of a bakery where a pigeon is having what looks like a heated internal debate with a crust of bread. You don't interfere. You're on your way to one of the more delicate parts of your daily route, the legal quarter, which means it's time to dodge powdered wigs, watch your language, and pretend you care about ordinances you've never read. Because here in this tidy district of clerks, scribes, and officials, there are rules, so many rules, and surprisingly a fair number of them involve trash. You pass a sign posted to a wall, neatly painted in looping black script. Défense de jeter des ordures devant cette porte. Amende, 5 livres. No dumping in front of this door. Fine, 5 livres. You chuckle. It's cute. The door already has a small pile of rotting apples and 2 chicken necks resting beneath it. Enforcement? Questionable. Historians still argue whether these fines were ever seriously collected. Some say they were mostly symbolic, meant to shame rather than punish. Others claim local officials were known to fine unliked citizens more often, using cleanliness as an excuse for control. You've seen both kinds. Once you watched a city guard argue with a street cleaner over a pile that didn't belong to either of them. The guard fined the cleaner paid in bread, and the guard ate it. You think that counts as bartering. But yes, technically there are punishments for improper disposal. For example, dumping waste between sunset and sunrise, illegal. Dumping human waste in the street instead of the gutter, illegal. Not shouting "Garde à l'eau" before dumping from a window, definitely illegal. The punishment ranges from a small fine to public scolding to your personal favorite, being forced to clean the street yourself under supervision while everyone watches. You saw it happen once. A merchant's apprentice tossed a slop bucket from a second-story window and hit a retired officer on the hat. Not just any hat, a feathered bicorn. The crowd went silent. A week later, the apprentice was standing knee-deep in his own shame, raking up muck under the eye of a very smug bailiff. You offered him your old rake. He declined. Some streets have their own signs, hand-painted warnings, threats, or illustrations. One alley has a skull and crossbones over the word vidange. You don't know who painted it, But the message is clear. Dump here and the neighborhood will notice. In fact, some neighborhoods take matters into their own hands. Local guilds hire private sweepers. Residents set up informal patrols. You've even seen an elderly woman in Saint Denis with a broom and a bad attitude chase off an entire wine cart for dripping too much on her doorstep. She's become legend. People call her La Balayeuse du Tonnerre, the sweeper of thunder. Some punishments are more creative. There are stories of people forced to wear signs reading, "I soiled the street," as they scrub their offense away. You don't know if it's true, but you want it to be. The city officials occasionally make rounds with little notepads, pretending to inspect piles and measure distances from doorways. You once asked one if he wanted a rake. He replied that raking was beneath his station. You replied that walking was beneath yours, but here we are. And then there's the inspecteur de voirie, officials in charge of street maintenance. They love rules. They write them, enforce them, ignore them, rewrite them again. One week a pile must be no larger than a loaf of bread. Next week, no larger than a hat. You asked what kind of hat. No one answered. You sometimes wonder what it would take to be fined yourself. Would you have to toss a live pig into the Seine? Or perhaps stage a garbage sculpture contest outside the Louvre? You're not planning anything. You're just wondering. Still, the punishments, rare though they may be, do serve a purpose. They remind people that their waste, like their words, has consequences. You rake up a small pile near a courthouse. Bits of torn parchment, a broken quill, dried wax, and what looks like a judge's wig tie. It smells faintly of old ink and crushed ego. Nearby, two clerks are arguing about legal procedures while carefully stepping over a puddle of something neither acknowledges. One of them gestures wildly with a scroll. The other slips on an onion peel and regains balance with a grace that suggests this is not his first garbage duel. Further along, a line of street vendors has set up unofficially. They're selling roasted chestnuts, boiled wine, buttons, and curiously ribbons printed with tiny messages. One says, "Don't trust the butcher." Another says, "This pile is not mine. You buy that one." Sometimes a citizen will try to enforce the rules themselves. You once saw a man yell at a baker for pouring yeast water down the drain. The baker shouted back something about, "Your mother's stew." The yeast water stayed. The man left. Another victory for fermentation. But while the rules are often ignored, the idea of the rules is important. They suggest that order could exist, that the streets might one day stay clean, that perhaps Paris might smell like flowers on purpose. You shake your head at the thought. It's a sweet dream, almost cute. As the bell in the Palais de Justice tolls, you step aside to let a judge pass. His robes flap like sails. He doesn't look at you, but his powdered wig turns slightly. A nod, a twitch, hard to say. You push the last of your pile into the gutter, where it joins the city's ever-flowing legal gray area, another street, another rule broken, another sigh. And somewhere someone is writing a new ordinance that no one will follow. You smile. Just another day in the rule book of rot. There's a tension in the air today. You feel it in your arms as you rake. Not just in the usual aching muscles or the low thrum of exhaustion behind your eyes, but in something deeper, more electric. The city is humming, not with joy, but with nerves. And the trash, it's different too. There's more of it. Everywhere you go, the piles are bigger, less hidden. Like the city has given up pretending. Like the people aren't even trying to be discreet anymore. A bone here, a bloody rag there, yesterday's stew flung straight from the bowl. You rake past a mound so foul that even Bertrand the rat avoids it, which is saying something. If Bertrand's out, something's wrong. The merchants are more irritable. A fishmonger curses at a cart that's blocking his stall. A baker kicks his broken bucket and shouts about flour prices. A woman with 3 kids under her shawl slams her shutters harder than she needs to. Paris isn't just smelly today. It's on edge. You stop near the Place de Grève, where public punishments are sometimes carried out. And today there's a crowd, not a cheering, festive crowd. Those happen when someone's being pilloried and the fruit is cheap. No, this one's quieter, brooding, watching a group of officials argue over how many barrels of grain are missing from the municipal stores. Someone mutters, "They feed the nobles and leave us the husks." Someone else spits on the street. You rake over it automatically. Historians still argue whether the growing unrest in Paris during the late 1700s was a slow boil or a series of sudden explosions. You don't know what the books will say, but you know what you feel. You feel the boil, the heat, the slow rising scent of rebellion. You rake a pile behind a wine shop and find broken glass. Not bottles, glasses. Like someone didn't just drink, but threw. The wine puddle has already dried sticky in the summer heat, attracting flies by the dozens. You wave them away. One lands on your forehead, you let it stay. The city's hunger is everywhere. The food piles are thinner. The bones you're raking have less meat. The children scavenging near the tavern today aren't laughing. They're working, focused, serious. Even the pigeons are fighting harder over crusts. A man approaches you, eyes sunken. He asks, "You seen the bread cart?" You haven't. He swears under his breath and disappears. You rake past a pile of discarded pamphlets, ink still fresh. One catches your eye. "Le roi nous affame." The king starves us. You keep moving. You pass a group of students in the Latin Quarter, animated and intense. One is drawing something in chalk on the wall, a guillotine crudely done but unmistakable. His friend tries to add a crown at the base of it. They argue about the shape. You rake past without a word. Even the trash seems political now. Noble's refuse is cleaner but guarded, hidden. You haven't been allowed into certain alleys all week. Meanwhile, in the working class neighborhoods, garbage is left out longer, rotting more publicly. As if to say, "See, look what they let us live with." The smell of anger is sharper than the usual rot. You round a corner near the Bastille and see the gates closed. Not unusual. But today 2 guards are outside, and behind them, the unmistakable scent of burning. Paper mostly. Maybe some cloth. You wonder if they're clearing out old records or hiding new ones. The guards glare at everyone who passes. Even you. You rake slower. A street preacher shouts about justice for the people. His voice carries over the stones. You rake through his echo. It's not just talk anymore, it's building. You hear it in the taverns where no one clinks glasses. You feel it in the streets where no one laughs when the chamber pots drop. The city's mood has shifted from complaint to preparation, and you, rake in hand, are somewhere in the middle. You see both sides. You clear the steps of townhouses where perfume still drips from railings, and you sweep the butcher's blood from where a man slipped and cracked his ribs this morning. There's talk of weapons, of rations, of barricades. You step into an alley and see a pile that doesn't belong. Furniture, wood, cloth, nails, all thrown into a heap. Not refuse, not food scraps, materials. You recognize a broken chair leg sharpened at one end. You back away. People are getting ready for something. Trash is no longer just the city's shadow. It's becoming its fuel. You rake past a bakery where the window has been cracked for days and no one's repaired it. The sign says, "Closed, flour shortage." A boy is watching the door, eyes hollow, chewing a bit of string. You offer him a hunk of bread from your coat. He takes it, doesn't thank you, just eats fast. You understand. Later that day, the trash piles start to shift. Not just more, different. You find pamphlets under piles of straw, nails in onion sacks, wine bottles with cloth tucked into them. What kind of cloth? You don't ask. You don't touch them. You rake around them, careful not to disturb what might soon explode. The city is murmuring louder now. You think of Bertrand the rat. You haven't seen him today. Maybe he knows better than you. Maybe he's found a quieter corner of Paris. You rake one last pile into the gutter and watch it swirl down the drain. It doesn't feel like cleaning anymore. It feels like sweeping a fuse. It's late afternoon now, and the sun has dipped just low enough to cast everything in gold. Everything, including the bloated horse corpse lying at the mouth of Rue Saint-Antoine. You stop in your tracks. It's not your job to move horses. That's supposed to be the knackers, the municipal crew with iron hooks and stronger stomachs. But the knackers are probably 3 courtiers away, arguing over who owes whom a wheelbarrow. And this beast isn't going anywhere fast. You step closer, the rake suddenly feeling less like a tool and more like a toothpick. The horse's side heaves slightly, air escaping from somewhere unpleasant. Its body has swelled in the heat, ribs straining against the skin, eyes glassy and too wide. The smell is thick and sweet and deathly. A scent that coats the back of your tongue and crawls up your sinuses. You'd cry if it weren't so routine. Dead horses are a reality in Paris, always have been. The city runs on them, literally. Haulers, carts, messengers, even street cleaners use them to move loads, and when one collapses, well, it becomes a different kind of burden. This one probably went down from exhaustion, maybe bad feed, maybe just age. You can't tell, and you don't need to. You just need to clear the way around it. You begin gently pushing the surrounding trash away, forming a buffer zone. You don't want anyone slipping. A child darts past and yells, "Monster!" with the glee only small humans can summon in the presence of massive decay. Historians still argue whether the city had any consistent protocol for dead animals. The records suggest a mix of official edicts and unofficial shrugs. Some say the knackers came daily. Others say it could take days, especially in poorer quarters. In wealthier areas, it depended on who the horse belonged to. If it wore brass fittings, someone would be along soon. If not, well, it was suddenly everybody's problem, and nobody's You rake more vigorously now, creating a wide arc around the animal. Flies burst into the air in clouds. One lands on your lip. You don't flinch. You're too far gone for flinching. The smell begins to change, deepen. The sort of change that suggests you need to wrap this up quickly or you'll start seeing things. You've heard stories. Men who hallucinated after clearing bloated livestock in the July heat. One claimed he saw Joan of Arc offering him lemonade. You believe him. As you work, you overhear two nearby washerwomen muttering. One points to the horse. "They'll dump it in the river," she says flatly. The other nods, like always. And there it is, the Seine, your old friend, your final fallback, your silent, glistening accomplice. When all else fails, when the carts don't come, when the knackers are late, when the pile is too big or the flesh too soft, into the river it goes. Of course, no one says this officially. Dumping animal carcasses into the Seine is forbidden. On parchment, anyway. But in practice, if it floats, it floats. If it sinks, problem solved. And if it washes ashore somewhere downstream, well, the next town can deal with it. You remember one particularly bad summer when the river looked more like soup than water. Sludgy, greenish and dense with bits of cloth, wood, meat, and gods know what. A man in a rowboat tried to fish and pulled up a boot attached to a leg. He fainted. The boot floated. The leg did not. The river is a blessing and a curse. It carries waste away, but it also brings it back. The tides don't care about ordinances or good intentions. You toss your trash, it drifts downstream, and if the wind is wrong, it comes back bloated and worse. You rake a line of fish bones away from the edge of the gutter. Behind you, two boys prod the horse with a stick. You bark at them to leave it. They scurry off, laughing. You glance down the alley and see a cart in the distance. Not the garbage kind, a private hauler. His horse is alive, barely, and pulling a flatbed of crates. He sees the dead animal, slows, considers helping, considers not. He continues on. You can't blame him. When night falls, maybe the knackers will come, maybe not. You remember the time a cow collapsed during a procession. It lay for 2 days in front of a bakery before the stench became a tourist attraction. People came to see it. Someone played music. A man tried to sell roasted chestnuts beside it. You don't know if that's optimism or madness. Possibly both. By evening, the air changes, cooler now. The sun retreats behind rooftops and the city exhales. But not in relief, in dread. Because the evening means less light, more shadows. And in the dark, the garbage shifts, grows, multiplies. You stand beside the horse, still there, still silent. You don't know if the knackers will come. You don't know if the neighbors will light candles or simply move their dining indoors. You don't know if tomorrow the city will smell better or worse. You just know that tonight something this size will not go quietly. You take one last look, then, without ceremony, you walk away. The streets are quieter now. Not silent, never silent, but hushed in that uneasy way just before a storm. Evening has pulled its long shadow over Paris, turning gold light into copper, then ash. The city's sounds dull with the sun, fewer vendors, fewer wagons, more creaks, distant murmurs, and the occasional cry of "Au voleur," echoing through the alleys like a cough no one wants to treat. You're raking near Rue Montmartre, the smell of old wine and scorched meat thick in the air. Behind you, someone plays a hurdy-gurdy off-key. Ahead, a lamplighter lights the first torch. He's humming something, maybe to keep his nose from noticing what he's stepping in. You shift your rake and lean against a post. You've made it through another day, and that's when you see him. A man in a coat far too fine for the street he's on, looking far too interested in a pile of rags near a drain. He kneels, plucks something from it. A coin, a note, a key. Then walks away quickly. No words, just a flicker of intent. You've seen more of this lately, not the rags, those are always there. But the interest. People rooting through garbage, not for food, not for candle wax or cloth scraps, but for information. Secrets, proof, documents. A political pamphlet tossed in panic, a letter not meant for public eyes, a torn-up badge of someone's former position. Trash is telling stories now, and people are listening. Historians will say the pre-revolution years were a slow crumble of control, laws losing teeth, officials losing grip, nobility losing face, but you saw it in the garbage first, in what people chose to throw away, in how quickly they ran after it later. You rake a pile of soggy newspapers, they're blank on one side. Someone printed on the back, handwritten slogans, crude caricatures of Louis XVI with donkey ears, the Queen riding a pig. You flatten them with your rake, push them into the gutter, not because you're loyal, because you're tired. You're not the only one. Paris herself feels tired. The city's stone bones creak under the weight of unmet needs. More people than usual are out tonight, moving, watching, waiting. Not loitering. Loitering implies aimlessness. These people have intent. You can smell it. It smells like sweat and ink and maybe fear. You rake beside the Palais Royal and someone hisses at you from the shadows. You ignore them. This isn't the place for questions. The truth is things are changing. But they're not official changes, not yet. No decrees have been posted, no buildings have burned. It's something quieter, a shift in posture. The city holds itself differently now, like it's expecting impact. Even the trash has changed. It's not just waste anymore, it's signal. A discarded armband, a broken sword, a burned pamphlet that someone meant to burn thoroughly. You once found a small cache hidden under a pile of cabbages, bottles, cloth, rope, a wig. Why a wig? You didn't ask. You walked away. More and more, your rake isn't just cleaning. It's erasing footprints. The carts have stopped running as late. One driver told you last week, too dangerous after dusk. You nodded. You understood. Yesterday, a broommaker's apprentice was beaten near the river for looking noble. He was wearing boots too shiny for his class, that's all it took. Today, someone tossed a tax ledger into a fire behind the bakery. The smoke stung. You raked the ashes like you were smoothing a blanket over a feverish child. You pass a man sharpening something against a step. He hides it as you approach, but not well. You look away. The rake squeaks softly in your hands. Once this city was full of rituals. Cleaning in the morning, deliveries in the afternoon, music at twilight. Now the rituals are slipping. Even the cats seem nervous. You reach your final stop, a plaza near a printing house. The pile is smaller tonight, but stranger. Torn pages, ink bottles, gloves. No food scraps, no bones. Just the leftovers of someone working fast and scared. You sweep it all away, not to clean, but to bury. As you work, you hear a shout from down the block. Not a brawl, just a name repeated, a warning. The name echoes once, twice, then vanishes into silence. Windows close, a dog barks, and still you rake. The candlelight in upper windows flickers uncertainly. Some are already dark, some never lit at all. You pause beneath a shuttered apartment. Behind it, someone coughs. You want to knock and say, "It's all right, it's not yet," but you don't. You keep your head down and push the final clump of ink-stained paper into the gutter. The city is quieter now, not peaceful, just holding its breath. You rest your rake on your shoulder, adjust your coat, and walk toward home. The moon is pale and full, like it's watching with interest but refusing to interfere. Behind you, the piles you cleared begin to gather shadows. And tomorrow might be the day your rake is no longer used for cleaning. Dawn returns to Paris with no ceremony. The first light brushes the rooftops like a painter too tired to finish the canvas. Chimneys begin to smoke, not because it's cold, but because habit demands it. The city stirs beneath its blanket of soot, and you, rake in hand, boots still damp from yesterday, find yourself standing once again in the narrow, familiar stretch of Rue des Prêtres. It looks the same. It never really does. There's a fresh pile already at your feet, eggshells, ribbon ends, something that looks like a poem written on butcher paper. You don't stop to read it. You're behind schedule, whatever schedule means anymore. You rake mechanically now, your hands moving before your thoughts catch up. Paris wakes the way it always does, coughing, dragging, discarding. But today you notice it's doing so without apology. The windows open more carelessly, buckets pour with less warning. The cries of "Garde à l'eau" are shorter, snappier if they come at all. It's as if the whole city has decided collectively we're done pretending. You pass a bakery that's boarded up, not from damage but from exhaustion. A note on the door reads, "Gone to visit family, may return, may not." You hope they do. A boy passes you on the street, not begging, not smiling, just walking, holding a stick with a cloth tied to the end. You don't ask what it's for. At this point, you assume everything is a signal. You step over yesterday's ashes, they're still warm. Trash today is oddly sparse, not because the city is cleaner, but because more is being kept. Bones are being boiled longer. Rags repurposed. Even wax drippings are scraped into tiny pots. Paris is conserving, not because it's learning, because it's bracing. You rake past a tavern where revolutionaries whispered last week. It's empty now. Chairs upturned, someone's coat still hanging on a nail outside. You wonder if they'll come back for it, or if someone else will. Historians will write that the trash piles began to shrink right before the storm hit. They'll say the people stopped throwing away what they thought might help build something new. Barricades, bandages, Molotovs, hope. They'll probably be right. The refuse now is nervous, slim, intentional. And as you reach the bend near the Seine, you see the final pile for the day. A heap of shoes. Old ones, broken ones, mismatched pairs that clearly never belonged together. You don't know if it's art, a joke, or the beginning of something serious. But you rake them to the edge anyway because routine still matters even now. Even as everything else frays, you walk the last stretch slowly. Your hands are sore, your coat stiff, your thoughts heavier than usual. but your steps are even. You still remember what they taught you. How to keep your gait flat, how to bend the knees when lifting heavier bundles, how to hold the rake like a liver, not a weapon. And yet, you feel it. Today, for the first time, the rake feels like both. You pass a closed church. Someone has drawn a giant question mark on the door in charcoal. You pause and look at it, then keep walking. Questions are everywhere now. As you round the final corner, you see two men dragging a cart with no horse, no harness, no driver, just hands and sweat and whatever strength they have left. They pass you without speaking, the wheels screeching faintly as they turn. You tip your hat. They don't look up. They're too busy hauling whatever they've salvaged. Ahead, the sun crests the rooftops, casting the long golden shadows of a city trying to remember how to stand. You reach the end of your route and set the rake against a wall. It rests there, silent and sticky, leaning like it knows what's coming. You don't need to say anything. You've walked these streets too long to believe that filth is only physical. Trash, you've come to learn, is memory. And today Paris remembers everything.